6 months ago, she was broken. 6 months ago, she was afraid. But 6 months ago, she didn't know she had a choice. Because when the man she escaped from crawls back into her life seeking vengeance, Priya discovers she's become something Park Jae-sung never intended her to be. Not his victim to protect, but his equal in a world of darkness. And when David Chen surfaces in Seoul with blood in his eyes, he makes the fatal mistake of not understanding that the girl he used to hit is now a woman who's learned how to fight back. This is the night everything changes. This is the night Priya becomes the danger. 3 months had passed since Priya stopped checking the windows obsessively. 3 months since she'd stopped flinching at sudden sounds. 3 months since Park Jae-sung had held her face in his hands and promised her that David Chen would never touch her again. And she'd finally believed him. The beach house had become her sanctuary. 2 hours from Seoul, perched on cliffs overlooking the East Sea, it was the place where Priya had learned to breathe again. The art studio with its ocean views had become her cathedral. Every morning she'd wake to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, and for the first time in her adult life, she'd feel something that wasn't fear. She felt free. She felt alive. She felt like herself again. Jae-sung would arrive on weekends, leaving his empire in Seoul to be here with her. He'd cook elaborate dinners. They'd sit on the terrace watching the sunset. He'd hold her like she was made of glass and also steel. Careful but never cautious. She'd learned that his dangerous exterior hid something softer underneath, something that had been broken by his sister's death and was slowly healing through her. And she'd learned that she was healing too. Not just from David's violence, but into something stronger. She was painting when the call came. Jae-sung's phone rang as he stood on the terrace with coffee in hand, looking out at the ocean. She saw him answer, saw his entire body go rigid. His expression shifted from peaceful to something glacial. She watched from inside, brush suspended midair, as his jaw clenched and he said only one word. Where? He ended the call and came inside, and Priya knew immediately that something had fractured. David's back, Jae-sung said flatly. He's in Seoul. He wasn't relocated properly. One of my men made a mistake, took him to a contact who had secondary connections we didn't know about. David paid his way out and disappeared for 3 months. Now he's resurfaced. And he's been asking questions about you. Priya's paintbrush fell from her hand, the rational part of her, the part that had built safety here over the past months, knew she should be terrified. But something else had grown inside her during those 3 months. Something that looked at fear and didn't blink. What kind of questions? She asked quietly. The kind a man asks when he's planning something violent. Jae-sung's voice was ice. He knows about the beach house. He knows you're here. He's hired people. He's planning to come for you. When? Tonight. Maybe tomorrow. We don't know exactly. His dark eyes met hers, and there was something almost apologetic in them. I failed you. I promised you permanent safety, and I failed. But I'm going to fix this. I'm going to make sure. No, Priya interrupted, and the word came out steadier than she felt. You're not going to fix this alone. Jae-sung looked at her like she'd spoken in a language he didn't understand. Priya, I spent months being saved, Jae-sung, months being protected. And I'm grateful, I'm so grateful I can barely breathe when I think about it. But I'm not that girl anymore. The girl who hid in diner bathrooms and counted dollars like they could buy her an escape. I'm not that girl who flinches at loud voices. I'm not that girl who waits to be rescued. She set down her palette. I'm someone different now, and I think it's time I showed you who. You don't understand what David is capable of. Actually, I do. Better than anyone. He's a coward with fists. He's a man who only feels powerful when the person across from him is afraid. And I'm not afraid of David Chen anymore. I'm angry. 6 months of anger, Jae-sung. 6 months of it building up inside me like a storm. She stepped closer to him. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to teach me how to fight. Not like a victim trying to run. like a warrior preparing for battle, because David's coming for me, and when he gets here, he's going to discover that the person he finds isn't the broken girl he left behind. He's going to find me. Jae-sung stared at her for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression. It was subtle, but it was there. Recognition, respect, maybe even pride. "Okay," he said quietly. "Then we prepare." They had 24 hours. Jae-sung called in his second-in-command, a woman named Min-ju, who looked like she'd never smiled in her life but moved like she was made of controlled violence. She arrived at the beach house with equipment and a no-nonsense attitude that Priya immediately respected. "You've never fought before," Min-ju stated. "Not a question." "No," Priya confirmed. "Then we focus on survival moves, defense, how to break holds, how to create distance, how to target vulnerabilities." Minju's eyes were cold and practical. "You're smaller than most men, so strength won't be your advantage. Speed will be, precision will be, knowing where to hit so that he can't hit you back." For 8 hours they worked. Priya learned how to drop her weight to break a hold. She learned where the most fragile parts of the human body were and how to exploit them. She learned that pain could be a tool, that her smaller frame was an advantage because she could move in ways larger bodies couldn't, that her anger, that beautiful justified anger, could be channeled into something precise and devastating. Her muscles screamed, her hands blistered, her mind adapted. By midnight, Priya could execute a wrist escape that would snap a man's grip like a twig. She could drive an elbow into a sternum with enough force to knock the wind from lungs. She could stomp on an instep, knew exactly which direction to twist to dislocate a shoulder, understood that sometimes the most effective weapon was your own body used like a blade. Jae-sung watched from the terrace, not interfering, just observing. When the training ended, Min-ju nodded at Priya with something that might have been approval. "You're a fast learner," she said. "You fight like someone who has something to protect. That's dangerous." After Min-ju left, Priya stood under the shower, watching bruises bloom across her arms and shoulders. She didn't feel afraid. She felt ready. Jae-sung found her in the bedroom staring out at the dark ocean. He wrapped his arms around her from behind and she leaned into him. "I'm terrified," he said quietly. "Not of David, of losing you, of something going wrong." "Nothing's going to go wrong," Priya said, and she believed it. "Because I'm not letting it. Not this time." He arrived the next evening, 5 men, just like before. David at the center, but different now. Thinner, wild-eyed, the kind of man desperation had sharpened into something almost unpredictable. They came up the beach house steps as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood orange and violent red. Jae-sung was waiting in the living room, dressed all in black, tattoos visible on his neck above his unbuttoned collar. But he didn't move. He didn't reach for the weapons that Priya knew were hidden throughout the house. He simply waited. David saw him and smiled, that same smile that used to make Priya's stomach drop. "Where is she?" "In a place you'll never reach," Jae-sung said calmly. "We'll see about that." David's eyes glinted with something cruel. "I've spent 3 months planning how I'm going to take her back. How I'm going to make her understand that she belongs to me. And when I'm done with her, when she's broken enough to never think about leaving again, I'm going to make sure she watches while I end you." The moment he finished speaking, Priya stepped out of the shadows. David's face went slack with shock. He didn't recognize her at first, not because she looked so different, but because of the energy radiating from her, the confidence, the absolute lack of fear in her eyes. "Hello, David," she said, and her voice was steady as stone. "I've been waiting for you." "Priya." His shock shifted into something darker. "You're going to regret every second you spent with him. I'm going to remind you what happens when you disobey me." He moved forward, and the 4 men behind him moved with him. But Jae-sung finally stirred, and something in his movement made them pause. He held up one hand. She asked me to let her handle this, Jae-sung said quietly, and I'm going to respect that. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to fight her, one-on-one. And if you hurt her, I'm going to make sure you understand the meaning of pain. But if you manage to beat her, he paused, then you get to walk out of here alive. That's more than you deserve, but it's the offer. David laughed. It was a harsh, broken sound. You're serious? You want me to fight this little thing? This will take 30 seconds. He came at her with his hands up, and Priya saw the exact moment he'd throw his first punch. She'd trained for this. She'd visualized it. She'd prepared her body and her mind for this specific moment. When his fist came, she didn't try to block it. Instead, she dropped her weight, pivoted, and his punch whistled past her shoulder. In the same motion, she turned and drove her elbow backward into his ribs with everything she had. The sound he made, that shocked gasp of air leaving his lungs, told her she'd done it right. David staggered backward, and there was confusion in his eyes. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. She was supposed to cower. She was supposed to beg. He came at her again, and this time his attack was meaner, faster, driven by wounded pride. She sidestepped the first punch, used his momentum against him to pull him off balance, and as he fell forward, she drove her knee up. He twisted just enough that it caught his hip instead of his groin, but he still went down hard. "Stay down," she said, breathing heavily. He didn't stay down. He lunged at her from the floor, trying to grab her legs, trying to take her down to a ground game where his greater strength might matter. But Priya had trained for this too. She pivoted, and as he passed beneath her, she used a move Minju had drilled into her 100 times. She caught his arm and twisted, and the sound of something popping in his shoulder, whether it was the joint dislocating or just the terrible stretching of ligaments, she didn't know and didn't care. David screamed. He lay on the floor, cradling his shoulder, and Priya stood over him, breathing like she'd run a marathon. She was covered in sweat. Her knuckles were bleeding. Her entire body ached, and she'd never felt more powerful in her entire life. "That's for every time you made me afraid," she said, her voice shaking with adrenaline and rage. "That's for every bruise. That's for every time I thought my life wasn't worth living. That's for me." She turned away from him, and David's 4 men, who'd been watching this entire exchange in stunned silence, didn't move. They looked at their boss on the floor, broken and defeated, and they looked at Priya standing over him like an avenging angel, and they made the calculation. This wasn't worth it. One of them helped David to his feet. "We're done here," he said to Jae-sung. "This is between them." "We're out?" They left quickly, practically carrying David between them. The sound of their car driving away down the beach road was the sound of Priya's old life, finally, definitively ending. She turned to face Jae-sung, and the moment their eyes met, he moved. He crossed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms like he needed to convince himself she was still whole. She held on to him, trembling now that the adrenaline was fading, and he held her like she was the most precious thing he'd ever touched. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered into her hair. "I'm so fucking proud of you." "I'm proud of me too," Priya said. And she meant it. Later, after she'd showered away the sweat and David's blood, after Jae-sung had bandaged her hands and held her while she processed everything, they sat on the terrace watching the stars come out over the ocean. "Everything changes now," Jae-sung said quietly. "For us. For what we are to each other." "What do you mean?" Priya asked. "You're not someone I protect anymore. You're someone I fight beside. That's different. That's deeper." He took her hand carefully, mindful of her injured knuckles. "In my world, that means something. It means you're not just my lover. You're my partner, my equal. And if you want it, it means you're part of my empire. Not hidden away, but standing beside me." Priya considered this. A week ago, maybe even a few hours ago, she would have been terrified by the prospect. But she wasn't the same person she'd been a few hours ago. She'd fought back. She'd won. She'd become someone capable of standing in darkness without flinching. "I want that," she said. "I want to stand beside you." Not because I'm afraid to stand alone, but because I choose you. Every single day, I choose you. Jae-sung kissed her then, and it was different from before. It wasn't tender or protective. It was passionate and equal and full of promise and danger in equal measure. The next morning they returned to Seoul. Jae-sung's penthouse felt different with Priya in it now. She moved through the space not like a guest, but like she owned it. Because in a way, she did. By surviving David. By fighting back. By refusing to be anyone's victim ever again. She claimed her place in his world. His inner circle came to the penthouse that evening. Men and women who'd been with him for years, who ran his operations, who handled his business. They watched Priya with new eyes when Jae-sung introduced her not as his lover, but as his partner. Minju was there, and she nodded at Priya with something like respect. "You did good," she said simply. "Most people would have died that night. You didn't. You won." "What happens now?" Priya asked Jae-sung later when they were alone in his office. "Now we build something new," he said. "Together." "You have instincts, Priya. I watched you fight David. You didn't just defend yourself. You adapted. You analyzed. You created opportunities. Those are skills that can be trained, that can be refined, skills that matter in my world." "You want me to work with you?" she asked, surprised. "I want you to become who you're meant to be," Jae-sung corrected. "Someone told me once that I was the only one who could save her, but she saved herself. And now I want to help her become unstoppable." Over the next month, Priya's transformation accelerated. She trained with Minju every morning, progressing from basic defense to more advanced combat techniques. She studied Jae-sung's business operations, learning how his empire actually functioned. She met with lawyers and accountants and discovered that the underworld had far more complexity than she'd imagined. She learned to negotiate, to read people, to understand the intricate dance of power and respect that governed Jae-sung's world. But she also painted, and she danced, and she laughed. Because she'd learned that being strong didn't mean giving up joy. Being a warrior didn't mean surrendering beauty. One evening, as they stood on the penthouse balcony overlooking Seoul, Jae-sung took her face in his hands the way he had so many times before. But this time, it felt different. This time, she wasn't being protected. She was being recognized. "I love you," he said. "I've loved you since that night in the diner when you confessed everything, but I love you differently now. I love you as my equal, as my warrior, as the woman who saved herself." "I love you too," Priya said, "and I'm never going to need saving again. But I'm also never going to let you fight alone. That's what partners do. That's what we are now." He kissed her then, and the city lights of Seoul spread out beneath them like jewels. Below them, Jae-sung's empire hummed with the machinery of power. Above them, stars pierced the night sky, and between them, something that had started as protection had evolved into partnership, into equality, into a love that didn't diminish either of them but made them both stronger. 3 weeks later, Priya walked into one of Jae-sung's legitimate business meetings for the first time as his partner, not his hidden love interest. The Korean businessmen in the room did double takes. Some looked confused. One elderly executive actually smiled with what looked like genuine respect. "Gentlemen," Jae-sung said, his hand on the small of Priya's back, "I'd like to introduce you to Priya Chen. She's now a director in my organization, handling international operations and diplomatic relations. She'll be leading our expansion into African markets. I trust her with my business. More importantly, I trust her with my life. I suggest you do the same." The message was clear. Priya wasn't just Jae-sung's lover, she was his equal. And if anyone had a problem with that, they could take it up with him. 6 months after David's return, Priya stood in her art studio in the beach house, the sanctuary that was still hers but now felt like home shared rather than hiding place. She was working on a new painting. It depicted a woman rising from darkness, Her silhouette strong and unbroken, her face turned toward light. Jae-sung watched from the doorway as he often did, just observing her create. "That's you," he said quietly. "That's all of us," Priya corrected. "Everyone who's ever had to become stronger than their circumstances demanded. Everyone who's ever chosen themselves." She set down her brush and turned to him. In his hand was a small velvet box. Her heart stopped. "I know what you're thinking," Jae-sung said, a slight smile playing at his lips, "that it's too soon. That we've only been together for 9 months. That relationships like ours don't end in proposals and weddings. I'm asking you to marry me," he said simply. "Not because I need to possess you. Not because I need to protect you. But because you're the person I want to build this future with. Because every morning I want to wake up and see you. Every night I want to fall asleep knowing you're next to me. Because you make the darkness bearable, and more than that, you make me want to be better." He opened the box to reveal a ring, not delicate or traditional, but bold and striking, with a diamond that caught the light like captured fire. "Yes," Priya said, and then she was laughing and crying simultaneously. "Yes, absolutely yes." He slipped the ring on her finger, and it caught the light from her painting, reflecting gold and red and every colour of strength and survival and transcendence. That night, they celebrated in Seoul. Jae-sung's inner circle came to a private club he owned. There was champagne and music and genuine celebration. But the most striking moment came when Minju approached Priya and placed a wrapped gift in her hands. Inside was a pair of fighting gloves, black leather with intricate red stitching. "For when you get bored being just a partner," Minju said with the ghost of a smile, "you've got the talent for it, you know. You could be formidable in the ring." Priya laughed. A real, genuine laugh that came from somewhere deep and healed inside her. "Maybe I will." As midnight approached, Jae-sung pulled her onto the balcony of the club, overlooking Seoul's glittering expanse. The city sprawled before them like a kingdom. In a way, it was his kingdom. And now, their kingdom. "Do you remember what you said to me?" he asked. "That first night, when I gave you the choice to stay or leave." "I said I was staying because I was already in love with you," Priya recalled. "You did. And I remember thinking that I'd save you and you'd save me. But I didn't know then how true that would be. How you wouldn't just let me save you. How you'd save yourself. How you'd become the person who made me believe in redemption." Priya looked at the ring on her finger, catching the city lights. She thought about the girl in the diner bathroom, counting bruises and dollars. She thought about the woman she'd become. She thought about the journey between those two versions of herself. A journey that had required darkness and danger and the man standing beside her. "I have one condition," she said. "Anything," Jae-sung replied. "When we get married, I'm keeping my last name. I'm not Chen anymore. I'm Priya, on her own terms. And maybe eventually when I'm ready, I'll take your name. But it will be my choice. Always my choice." Jae-sung smiled, a real, genuine smile that transformed his dangerous face into something almost beautiful. "I wouldn't have it any other way." They kissed as Seoul glittered beneath them, and the city seemed to hold its breath. Because what had begun as a story of salvation had become something far more profound, a story of two broken people who'd found each other in darkness and together had learned to create light. And the most breathtaking part? This was only the beginning. If you're still breathless, if your heart is still racing, if you're already desperate to know what happens next, then you know exactly what to do. Like this video. Subscribe to our channel right now, because Priya and Jae-sung's story is far from over. Their wedding is coming. New threats are emerging. And the woman who learned to fight back is about to discover just how far she'll go to protect the man she loves and the empire they're building together. Don't miss episode 3. Subscribe now. The best is yet to come.